Hi there. Viewer Ashin Qureshi left a comment a little while back about the relationship between codependency and different plant medicines and addictive substances, and I just thought it was such an interesting perspective that I've been thinking about it a lot. So thank you for that. But I'm going to channel the spirit of tobacco in a little while. But I wanted to share some reflections on what tobacco actually is and on codependency in general. And if you watched the video I did some months back about the neurosomatic circuits, you would notice that the first circuit is the one you could describe as the general attitude of I'm not okay, you're okay. And it's the first circuit because it's the circuit of the infant. So it's the circuit of the breastfeeding infant. And of course it has to do with that basic instinct of one's survival being completely attached to a perfect other who's in charge, in this case the mother. And notice how a lot of candy, for instance, or melted cheese or very seductive stuff like that has that sort of creamy sweetness to it, which is that type of appetite or void that we're essentially trying to fill after we're weaned off. And tobacco has a lot of the same qualities. It has this sense of really filling you up. It makes you kind of sick, but it also makes you very content for a little while. And then, of course, as nicotine addiction progresses, so does that feeling of a hole you just can't fill within you. And it's interesting. I think this energetic relationship in codependency that you could also use to describe the relationship you have to addictive substances, once you get addicted at least, because it has that same quality of bringing something out in you. So the drug brings a quality out in you which is actually inherent in you, but it creates the illusion that it's the drug bringing forward that quality, and that you need that drug in order to access that space. And in that way, of course, it relates to the codependent narcissist dynamic, where what actually happens in that stage you call the love bombing stage is that the codependent identifies with all the positive qualities that the narcissist seems to be able to bring out, but is actually fed by the energy of the codependent. And that, of course, is the same with the drugs, because it's your energy feeding the experience, and at the same time you have that illusion where you feel in order to even maintain that energy you need more and more of the substance, and tobacco is very much like that. And of course there are different manifestations of tobacco. I had someone introduce me to rapé once, which is to those of you who don't know, is a shamanic substance, a tobacco snuff, but it's also my impression that it's usually made from different varieties of Nicotina rustica, which is a different and more complex type of tobacco, and can also be poisonous when you ingest it. But it has a lot of other molecules which also interact with it, and it certainly had a different calming effect than smoking a bunch of cigarettes had. But it still, of course, has nicotine, which is the most addictive substance that we know of. And it's very interesting. I believe the first historical mention of tobacco is on Columbus's second voyage, where a couple of his men have been sent to scout out a Taino village, and probably looking for gold, and seeing how easy people were to subdue. And then they're introduced to cigars, and when they come back, there's this description of that they had learned to drink the smoke, and even under the threat of punishment they said they wouldn't be able to relinquish the habit. So it is like, it's strange that this substance, there's something within it that sort of conspires against the free will of the human being who ingests it. And it's, I remember myself from smoking my first cigarette that actually feeling very queasy and sick for about an hour and a half, and then thinking, hey, let's try and do that again, and the rest is history, of course. And for the past year or so, I've quit tobacco and then gone back and then quit it again and then gone back. But it really has very much that pacifier effect. I think that's why so many are connected to it, and people I know who've had a much easier time kicking tobacco usually just got hooked through social habits, but don't have necessarily those underlying issues of trying to feed that empty void of not feeling okay. And I think it's very interesting because, of course, it's very oral, and especially cigarettes are very oral, and you would notice that that usually a suppression of the pleasure instinct in people is manifested as a tension around the oral region. It's what Wilhelm Reich described as the chronic depressive type, I believe. So a highly armored individual, someone who has a lot of tensions and suppressions, especially around the mouth region, because it wasn't fed well, properly enough, or was shown enough love in those stages of early childhood where it was necessary. And it also has that illusion of creating an intimate relationship to someone else. I heard the description once that, okay, I don't have any friends, but at least I have 20 friends in my pocket who won't judge me, right? And tobacco very much has that idea of the pacifier that you can pull out whenever life is hard, and then you have that quiet communion with something other that seems to calm you down and soothe you and tell you everything is all right for a little while, which is also of course quite a demonic effect, because essentially how you can recognize a demon is that it enters making you feel good and elated, and then it leaves you completely drained and out of it and worse off than you were. Also, I've noticed it really shuts down the heart, and it has that tendency to amplify well, the curvature of the spine, and you could say this is Luther has this expression of mankind being incurvatus in se, which means, well, bent into itself, curved onto itself, and that's that sense that you almost get that C shape where you're just smoking away, and then you can sort of bend over and enter into that sort of private space that you're unable to maintain, because usually if you have codependent tendencies, you are constantly looking for affirmation out there, and I think those are some of the more compelling qualities of tobacco for those of us who have had a rough time trying to kick that substance. Then there is also an interesting aspect, because it seems that nicotine in itself improves memory functions, and to me there is some sort of almost mystical relationship between the introduction of tobacco and the cigarette in particular in the 1800s, and the development of great prose literature, which is that, like, if I just talk long enough and access my memory and analyze all these things, I can sort of make sense of the world, and that seems to also be an underlying current of the drug. But it is a strange substance, and my impression is that much like eating meat is somehow becoming less and less vibrationally a match for human beings in general, so is a lot of the substances that we have been very attached to, such as tobacco, and I also believe that alcohol is phasing out in a lot of ways. So those were some perspectives on the plant, and now let's try to hear from herself what she has to say about her character. I'm glad to communicate with you, though so many of you seek my communion in quiet spaces and in shared moments. I have the effect of bringing you back into a quietude, a felt experience of the space. But see, since so many of you have severed this bond to the segmentation of space, the feeling of fullness in the moment, you have abused my spirit, and I have come instead then to teach you the lesson of hardships, of being attached to a momentary pleasure, of slowly eroding life force into bit by bit of destructive but savored flavor that burns and dampens your spirit. There is nothing inherently evil in me. Instead, I brought motivation to the first of my acolytes, much like other substances you encountered. I was also one of great commerce, meaning that you exchanged me, you wanted to cultivate me in order to motivate others to do. See, human beings are creatures of great frugality in their natural state, but when you began to encounter the other spaces within my spirit, within your interaction with other plants, you discovered that there were higher realms attainable to you by allowing yourself to enter into a communion with forces that seemed beyond you, that seemed able to regulate your mood, that seemed able to bring you epiphanies, disturbances, fun, laughter, communion, and understanding. A function of my being, as well as many other plants that you have learned to cultivate and that you have proliferated around your planet and in your communities. It is to bring people into a shared vibration, a shared space of communion. That is what is embodied in the spirit of the ritual of the peace pipe. But then, as I am picking up from your human understanding, you began to experience a certain degeneracy in your own cultures. That is to say, the further you came from the experience of shared and felt community, the more appealing it became to you to cover these feelings with a personal community. And this personal community, it is one of your wavered personality interacting with different distractions, different ways to regulate this panicked grief that runs through humanity. And so notice the lesson that I teach you when you have become too enmeshed in my energy. It is that panicked grief that supersedes all other things. It becomes impossible for you to not recognize that there is a void within you, and that void is calling out for something to satiate it. Notice then, when you return to my spirit, even I cannot fill that void, and the bitter illusion has somehow lifted, even though you again are in the sweet presence of my soothing energy. You realize that this would not have happened to you if there was not something within you that wanted to experience a type of pressure point, something overcooking within you, and see that is what is happening to many of you now. You are learning that this feeling of something boiling over within you is a quality of energy. It is something that resides in your body without it and makes up everything, and so you cannot escape it, not through my being, not through the being of any substance will you be allowed to escape the experience of facing yourself. And so I come in many forms, but they all have that in common, that they try to harness my power into something that can be exchanged as a commodity. In that way I bring forward riches, and I give you the incentive to go searching for answers. And when you have exhausted this quest for answers without yourself, you will find that they reside within yourself, and that it is yourself that generates these experiences. It is yourself that builds that energetic bond of attachment to my spirit, and that you can build that energetic bond of attachment to any spirit and then have it nourish you in any way. And so should you want to escape from the bonds of my energy, should you want to relinquish the grip that the spirit of tobacco has on you, you will do well in attaching yourself to the great and life-giving Mother. Notice that every light in the sky is a stream of milk that can be drunk in by you, and that can feed your life force, and that can penetrate your heart. And so, not closing it off, but massaging it open, that is where you are headed, to a place of acceptance and openness, to a place where all the spirits you have communed with will have taught you the lessons you needed to learn in order to see your own spirit arise and break free from any bonds that have held it hitherto. Therefore know that I also bless you, and even the darkest experiences I have bestowed upon you, or even the false comforts that you may feel have deceived you, have been in order to set you free, and in order to see you on your way to something unexperienced and yet so well known by the human hearts, the total manifestation of love. Therefore, be blessed by me and by all spirits that live on this earth and have your interest at heart.